Well, I think it's. Let me give me a little leeway here. I think probably the interesting thing about this is you're inside a space center. You're inside Kennedy Space Center, okay, and you've got crew access, and you're inside the orbiter processing facility, and you've got the entire crew come walking up to you. Okay,
right.
It's a pretty interesting thing in itself, and being internal and having crew access, all these items got signed during some milestone events. And let me explain that a little bit. Each orbiter, for each specific mission, for each specific astronaut crew and each specific astronaut crew member, there's a processing flow that takes place from the time that the vehicle touches down from the last mission to the time it launches for the next mission. During that flow, during that linear flow, there is a period of time, about 3 months before launch, and it is officially the first time that the crew comes in as an entire crew. All the crew members fly into Kennedy Space Center for the very first time. It's called CEIT, Crew Equipment Interface Test. This is where the vehicle is still horizontal in the orbiter processing facility, and it's generally done over the weekend when there's less employees, and it is the first time that the VID office integrates those specific crew members into that specific orbiter for that specific mission. The payload specialist will get in the bucket and go around the payload bay in a bucket, and it will touch and look for all kinds of sharp edges if those cannot be fixed. It gets documented, so when they're out on an EVA 3.5, 4 months later, it's called out because they certainly don't want to rip their suits. So you got the payload specialist back there doing that with their white gloves on. You've got the commander and the pilot looking at the window, the flight deck. Scratches, if they're too big and the commander doesn't like them, they have to be buffed out of the windows. It's the first time those two are in that cockpit, the orbiter cockpit, for that specific mission. Your mission commanders will be on the either in the mid-deck looking at the configuration of the avionics, the lockers, the stowage, and all that, or they'll be up looking out back towards the payload bay windows, calling out procedures for the mission specialist and whatnot that are out in the actual payload bay. So it's that first integration. It's a major milestone in the flow. And these particular STS-107 documents that you see, the majority of those got signed during that day, during that integration of that CIT event. And they're signed during lunch, which is the appropriate time to make contact with the crew member for such a deal as right after lunch. So it's all done internally. The crew is right there. There's no separation. There's no mailing them in and going through the XYZ plotter machine or some crew member sign it and the other one say, put it in the machine. I don't want to sign. It's none of that. These are all done physically in my presence inside the Space Center.
Super.
The other event, which is one of my favorite items, is that PCBT Su-17 document. That's part of this. It's a work, and it's actually a piece of work in itself. Mm-hmm. And that is the second major milestone. The vehicle at this time is out at the pad, and it has gone vertical. So it is the first time in this flow, again, that the crew officially comes in for a full suit up. They take the vehicle all the way down to T0 without launching it, but they are flight ready at that. All the stowage is done. Most of the problems with the vehicle from the previous flow have been worked out. And it is the first time that they're in that configuration, all suited up as a crew in that vehicle. And it's generally a 2 to 3 day operation. They have crew is all over the Space Center. There's all kinds of training and preparation that they have to do. But that document is done in a conference room that you have to have access to. And that's where they're briefed by all the anomalies from each engineering group that has something to do with the flight operations. They are briefed by that. The head of that engineering unit briefs them at the end of the table as to what the problem was originally, where they're at, whether generally these are situations that have not been fixed, and that what they perceive as the outcome in the flight rationale to fly with that vehicle with that problem particularly not fixed, or that they are going to be able to fix it, but they're still waiting for lab work or whatever the situation is. So the entire crew is in that, being briefed by the various engineering groups related to that vehicle and those mission specific items. So you're actually in a small conference room with less than, generally I would say, about 35 people, and afterwards is another official appropriate time to get those documents signed. Most of the documents just go in the trash can, but very few employees will stand up and have the crew sign them out. And so again, the TCD SU-17 document is the operational manual for the Launch Control Center that takes that vehicle with the crew all the way down to T0, but does not launch the vehicle. The SU-7 briefing that's done launch week is done over teleconference with the same engineers, briefing the crew on what wasn't able to get fixed, if anything at all. It's a much smaller document, but you do not, at that point, very few people have the medical the medical certs to interface with the crew at that point, because the health stabilization comes in that week, and very few family members can see the crew members at that point. And that SU-7, that is the operational manual that coincides with the SU-17, but the SU-7 actually launches the vehicle. So generally you would get those signed as well when the crew came back, but in this case the crew did not come back. So there is not a SU-7 being offered here for obvious reasons. And I did have one in the crew quarters, but that's a whole other story where all that stuff got seized because of the disaster. Not seized, but actually stolen. And Bobby doesn't need to talk about that or anything, but even the stuff from the Israelis got stolen up there, which caused a big stink. And obviously it got sniped because of the historical value of all the items. So I was fortunate enough that I had crew access during these two milestones at Kennedy Space Center, was able to get these documents signed. The thing, too, that we have to remember, the unique thing, is that 107, and I'd have to go back and check, but it was almost postponed for 4 years from the time that it actually got the White House signature and the congressional approval on it. Obviously, let's look at the time period. We were post 9/11, and we were flying the first Israeli astronaut ever. Tensions in the Middle East, obviously, that was a huge issue concerning terrorism. In fact, that flight on launch, we set all records for law enforcement personnel. They brought people in from all over the country. We had guys, obviously, in swamps with bazookas ready to go. The military surveillance and the law enforcement surveillance during launch, that launch week was intense at Kennedy Space Center. We had never had anything like that before. So obviously this whole flight had an aura about it. And, obviously the crew, they did not make it back. But some of the documents signed there, you'll see one of the documents actually has a 1999 date on it. It's 107 related. It just shows you how many times that flow got moved back, and other flights flew on Columbia before that was not originally manifested to happen. So there's a long period of time there, and there's a couple years there of documents to where the crew had not even posed for a photo yet. So I've got a couple documents in there. But by the time they actually came for the flight, everything had been released, all the crew photos, which is not always the case at KSC. Sometimes the last couple of weeks, the actual crew photo gets released. It makes it very hard during those milestones to get that stuff signed. Probably too much information on that end of the deal. But the bottom line was I worked those flows. I had crew access, and those things were done in my presence. The Johnson Space Center glossy came directly from Rick Husband from Johnson Space Center. That is the only document that was already signed, but it was handed to me directly from the commander of the mission, Rick Husband, the late Rick Husband. And other than that, all those were signed during those two milestone events inside Kennedy Space Center. And it's just a really unique little time period in my life, to be able to, see the crew living and breathing right in front of you, having lunch, interfacing with them throughout the day in the vehicle, Columbia, which we no longer have as well. So just a little neat time period in history, and feel very fortunate to have been able to experience that and look into their eyes and see the personalities and et cetera.
Like, so my last question is from a space collector's point of view, where is this stuff kind of rank with everybody that collects this type of stuff, and like, why would it be good for or why would they want to have it for their collection?
Well, obviously, you have two tragics during the shuttle program, and a tragedy of Apollo 1 before that, with the 3 crew members perishing. And so, right or wrong, obviously, when you have a crew that doesn't survive their mission, that those are, for, again, right or wrong, more desirable pieces. Challenger, obviously, would be, for lack of a better term, in competition with the Columbia tragedy. But if you were collecting crew complete items from the shuttle program, and you thought about it, is what would be obviously your most desirable would either be a Challenger item crew completed or a Columbia item crew completed. The other crews survived. They signed before they left, and they signed after they came back, for the most part. And that's not the case with these items. They're much rarer because obviously the crew did not survive. We're not able to do the press events and the employee thank you events internally when they get back. So you have and just the historical significance of those two vehicles literally exploding during those missions of one, either ascent or reentry. So it probably doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to understand the desire, the historical significance, and the desire of having something from those faithful missions.
Excellent. So we'll appreciate your time. So we won't use any of this. We'll call Bobby, get in contact with Bobby, and then he'll just probably use it for informational purposes. And if it's something that they want to get you on camera for, that you guys can talk about that at a different conversation.
I didn't think I did too good of a job here, guys, really, on this. I don't have the stuff in front of me, and I tried to really nutshell the whole deal. And I know that when I originally talked to Bobby Jr. about all this, there was a lot more drama and passion, and we went into greater detail. So he completely understood the significance of all this. But they need more information. That's great. But
where are you located?
The one. Let me backtrack 1 second before I get this off my mind. The other part about collecting this stuff is generally a lot of these collectors do not have internal access. So they solicit the astronaut office through the mailroom, the astronaut mailroom. And a couple things can happen there. A crew can be willing to actually hand sign those and stick it in the mail. And some crew members have been known to have, and NASA would hate me to say this, but it is true, have their secretary sign it, and they do a pretty good job. And some crew members have been known to have their daughters take care of that load. And then there's the XYZ plotter machine where it's a template, right, and all that. And quick example is there was a German dealer who had done that and was selling them for $1,800 at a reduced rate. Just to let you guys know a little tidbit here, after the tragedy, but they were all the XYZ plotter ones. So people were even willing to pay a couple grand unknowingly, obviously, but that's all documented history, where this is something that's, internally done, physical access done exactly in my presence. So it's bar none, it's the real stuff. And each piece of that media that was crew completed was that stuff was either inside the orbiter processing facility. I mean, it was there when it got. We were internal when all that was signed, crew and myself. So it's just kind of the buyer of this, bar none, is absolutely assured that these are authentic autographs. There's absolutely no question whatsoever. And there's several employees that were with me when all this happened and whatnot. So it's all something that's very verifiable. There's no possibility of these being auto-penned or forged or anything. I was there inside on those days. So,
and where are you located? Where are you located?
I'm in Cape Canaveral, Florida.
Oh, great. All right, so you're still where?
I'm still living here, even though we don't have a shuttle program anymore.
Yes. Excellent. So I'll just have Bobby Jr. contact you, and then we'll take it from there. And I appreciate your time.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Bye.